All right, well, thank you for moderating, Alexis, and thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be here in Kentucky. So Alexis is passing around evaluations. I'm pre-tenure and I'm going up this year, and so Utah State has to keep really close tabs on me so that hopefully I can keep doing this after this year. So if you could fill those out, that would be fantastic. I ran out of handouts, but please, for anyone who didn't get one, don't worry, I'm happy to email them or post them later. So please don't feel like you have to take a ton of notes. It's gonna kind of feel like information coming from a fire hose, but we'll just cover a lot of different topics and hopefully have a great discussion at the end. And so once again, I'm happy to share the presentation, so don't worry about taking notes. I wanted to introduce myself a little bit because I will be giving 4 talks today, and so we should get to know each other a little bit better. So I'll start with introductions here, and then we'll get into the actual workshop part of the talk. So the Utah cut flower scene. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I lived there my whole life until 2018 when this urban and small farms professor position came up in Utah, and I was finishing my PhD. I couldn't believe that it existed. It was seriously made for me. And so I in Wisconsin, I really worked with large scale farms, dairy manure management. But when I moved to Utah working with small scale farms, I knew I had to pivot, had to be a high value crop. And I was hearing rumblings about cut flowers as kind of this next thing. And so really I just dove right into it. So here's a little shot of Utah. I'm right up here in the northern part of the state. That's where most of our population lives. And that's where most of the cut flower farming is taking place. So I've been keeping tabs on the Utah cut flower farms, and it seriously has surged exponentially in the years. We have about 20 to 30 new farms per year, so we're sitting at around 135. And just for reference, they're mostly concentrated right here. So that's where Salt Lake City is, and that's where Provo is, which is where BYU is. Kind of our population centers. They're starting to come in the southwest corner of the state. That's where St. George is, about an hour from Las Vegas. A lot of the rest of this is mountains and desert. So this is really where most of our arable land is. So we've had this tremendous surge. Most of the farmers there are urban micro farmers, less than a half acre in production. So we don't have a ton of acres in cut flower production, but what we're finding is that the value for this crop, the money that it's bringing in, is surpassing a lot of other things. There's been a tremendous benefit of cut flowers to the Utah economy. We'll talk more about that. But I was just curious, what's the cut flower scene like here in Kentucky? How many cut flower farms do you think there are? Any ideas? I know it's growing really fast across the US. This will be interesting to kind of keep track of. But one thing I've noticed is that no matter where we are, yes, there's going to be regional and state differences, but we truly have more in common than we have different. Flower farmers are facing the same needs across the US. There's so much education about the importance of local flowers to bring to people's attention. So, considering workshops, getting on with it. I'm just gonna. So I want to start and acknowledge Dr. Ruby Ward. She is an economist at Utah State. Oh, and I should say I'm a soil scientist, so I'm not an event planner, although kind of on the side, I guess, for our extension outreach. I'm not an economist, but I work with a lot of people, and we've had a lot of professors come on board now. I've got a plant pathologist dedicated to cut flowers, Ruby, an economist, another economist, Kinda Curtis. It's been fantastic. And so she had a couple grad students who needed a project. So we gave them cut flowers, and we wanted them to kind of quantify what the value of cut flowers is to the Utah economy. Have no idea. And so we had a few farmers serve on the panel, and then we surveyed the cut flower farmers on their demographics. We had about a 20% response rate from the farms, which is actually pretty decent. And so these are the results. So at the time, about a quarter acre was typically in cut flowers. A lot of people in the Salt Lake area were turning their backyards into cut flower farms. We had vegetable farms that were diversifying slowly. And what we found is that their average revenue, so this is their receipts, it doesn't count for input costs, was $64,000 per acre as the equivalent. And this ranged from $7,000 to $200,000. Tremendous range across cut flower farmers. And so We dug into that a little bit deeper, or I should say they did. And what they found is that the farmers who were most successful had 2 or more sales channels. Wasn't all going to wholesale, wasn't all going to CSAs. They were doing at least 2 things. And that educational experiences, some form of agritourism, bringing to their farms, teaching classes, teaching workshops, added around 10 to 20% for these most successful farmers. But overall, we're really amazed at how entrepreneurial these farmers were. We still don't know the total size of the market, but we're seeing that local flowers aren't a fad. They've always been around, and it's really kind of on the heels of the local food scene. So that said, the economics of having workshops can be very promising, but there's a few things to keep in mind. And so I'm going to talk about this from a real beginner level of throwing an on-farm workshop or maybe off-farm workshop. The whole goal of hosting a workshop should be to sell your brand and especially to sell your flowers. That's the whole goal. And so I want to make a quick plug here for Jenny Love of Love and Fresh Flower Farm. She's out of Philadelphia. She has an amazing online course about this if you want to know more. And so some of the considerations are thinking about your location. Are you in a rural or urban area? Hosting on or off the farm? The amenities that are either on your farm or at a place where you may want to host a workshop. And then also just thinking how much you like teaching or not. It takes some energy. So we'll talk about each of these things a little bit more. So hosting at your farm. This is me. This is actually just back in March. We had a farm tour up in Logan. So where Utah State is located, it's right on the Idaho border. It's about an hour and a half north of Salt Lake. People have to cross a canyon to get there. Very rural. And so we don't actually host a ton of things up in Logan. We usually go down to Salt Lake to meet the crowds. But we decided to have people there this year to take a look at all the work we've been doing. And so some of the things to ask yourself are, do you even want to host it on your farm? Is there the space? Are there the amenities? And we'll kind of go into what those are. Having people come to the farm really provides this experience to participants. They can get engrossed in what you do. So once there's kind of that reputation in place, people want to go to the country and feel that. Bringing people up to USU, they could see my production trials and see all the things that we do that we couldn't share in pictures. It's easier on the host in some ways to host on farm because there's easier setup. I'm not lugging all my stuff somewhere else. People are coming to me. But things to be aware of are checking with your city or county for any permits or insurance that you may need, and thinking about the time and effort for hosting. So in general, rural locations command lower prices than urban environments. People in the city have more money overall. And so that's something to think about when you're trying to figure out your price point and what you're gonna need to break even. We'll talk about budgets here coming up. So there's these benefits from being in a rural location, this immersive experience. Reputation, once flower farmers or anyone starts to develop a reputation, it's easier to attract participants. It's not so hard to fill seats. If I threw a tour in probably 2019, I don't think we would have had the turnout. But this year we had about 60 people, and most of the people there were for flowers. But it was because I had built a reputation over time, and so they made the drive. So that's something to think about, is maybe starting off, it can be easier to host off farm, easier to go to these urban areas to fill seats. And then as the reputation is built, people are more and more willing to make the drive. Some things to think about with hosting in an urban environment. If you already live in an urban place and have sort of an urban micro farm, or you want to go to an urban area to host the event, they can be more convenient for the participants. So this is a good idea to think about for event times. If you're out in the country and people have to drive a ways, evening workshops might be tricky. Getting off work, the commute, getting there. Maybe there's a limit to just weekend events. Whereas in the city, there's not a long drive. You could easily host, maybe it's more easy to host events at other times, such as in the evenings after work. But there can be less space and more restrictions, and I'll show some examples coming up here. And I also want to show examples about how there can be some opportunities to collaborate as well. All right, so I have this rural example and an urban example that I just want to show how they're kind of hosting these events. There's a flower farm called Chateau Monet, and it's located in Payson, Utah. This is south of the city. So Utah is actually number 2 in tart cherry production in the US. We're a very far number 2 after Michigan, but we're gonna take it. And most of those tart cherry farms are located in Payson. So it really gives this beautiful pastoral scenery when you're driving down from the city. But she has really built this reputation. She's got 10 years of experience. They have this 80-acre diversified farm. She's got this huge high tunnel. Right here is one of our friends from Tennessee who came and wanted to visit some of the flower farms this past May. I want to point out that she's got these beautiful lights that are hanging in her high tunnel, so it can double as event space on her farm. She doesn't have, well, she was just building actually some kind of permanent structures with shelter, but before that and up until this year, she's been having most of her events take place in this high tunnel, so it's used for production and for events. So this is looking into the tunnel, and then when you're looking out of the high tunnel, you can see the Wasatch Mountains, this beautiful mountain range. So she's got the scenery, people come. It's rural, so there's plenty of places to park. She can add extra tents when she's hosting events, weddings, and so forth. But she's built this strong reputation that really helps people come. Now, my next example is an urban flower farm. This is located in North Ogden, so this is right in the heart of where it's a little bit north of Salt Lake City, but it's still a really urban area. In fact, if you're driving past her house, you'd think it's just another suburb, another house, but somehow it opens up into this backyard with 2 acres, and so each year she's been expanding, and so she's right in the heart. It doesn't take people a long time to drive. So Kelly, the North Ogden Flower Farm, she focuses on you-pick events and workshop. Actually, both of these farms do. And she's actually grown her reputation such that now when florists are in a pinch, they come and pick her out. They actually come to her farm. And so what I really liked about her farm, and I apologize for the pics. When I visited her this fall, I was with our plant pathologist and we were looking for disease. So that's what most of my pictures are of her farm. But she did this wonderful job of making really clear, well-defined pathways. And that's critical for you-pick events to help lead the people through and have them know where they should be walking. And so she's just been absolutely killing it with each year. I think her returns were 5 times greater in 2022 than they were in 2021. So she's just been slowly expanding. She does not have a sheltered area though, so her events are going to be weather dependent. So that brings me to on-farm amenities. These are some of the things to have in place if people are going to come to your farm. The first thing is space. Now, I really just do tours at our farm. I don't do, workshops where people are making something. So I'm going to go off what Jenny Love says, which is that she thinks about each person should have around a 4x4 foot workspace. That's something to consider for the size of the event and tables that you might need. Also room to park, depending on how many people are going to be there. Kelly in North Ogden, she's got a limited amount of parking with her driveway. So that's a drawback for some of these urban places. Also thinking about shelter and shade. It can be as simple as a tent. It can be as simple as a tree that can provide shade. But these are things to think about. And if those things don't exist, then thinking about the time of day that it's going to be held. When I was in Wisconsin, I ran a community garden and we would have work days, and I should not have scheduled work days at 3 p.m. in July, right? So, but evening would have been fine, and morning was great, had a lot of attendance. Also thinking about, do you want to host it in the off season? And so I really do say that it's best to start small. Don't invest in tons of infrastructure until you know that you like it and you want to expand. It can start simple and then grow it as needed. I wanted to show how simple some things can be. What we do at USU when we're having tours is if it's going to be an inclement day, people just come in our high tunnels. That doesn't work well for making things necessarily. And this is my my shed as extra space. But I took this picture because my undergrad just randomly cleans. It makes me really happy. So water has to be available. Bathrooms have to be available. And refreshments are a really nice touch. It helps people feel special and it helps them feel like they're really taken care of. And so that's part of cultivating this whole experience. Some drawbacks. There's a lot of time to clean up. Boy, whenever we host an event, I've got all my people on that farm we're re-wood chipping, we're weeding extra. And so there's a lot of labor hours to think about just in prepping for on-farm. So I'm saving in travel time and lugging all my stuff, but there's a lot, I'm paying people a lot to just do that work. And what is that taking time away from is something to consider. There's so many amenities. We've talked a little bit about that. There may need to be insurance. I know our flower farmers in Utah don't feel comfortable having people at their place unless there's insurance. They have insurance in place. Thinking about reputation, especially depending on where one lives, and then these limitations potentially on when they're held. So this is a picture, by the way, of Sego Lily Flower Farm. This is her backyard in Salt Lake. And so her area, she also farms a neighbor's backyard, so that together she has I believe this is about 1/8 of an acre, and then she's got another 1/8 of an acre. Does really well, but there is not room to host an event at her house. Doesn't really want people at her house. So what she does is she actually pairs up with a nursery / farm shop to teach classes. And I want to point out the pricing here, which is around $1,500 for her classes. It's around $100 a class per person is how that comes out. She's in Salt Lake, so a very urban area. She's going to a place with a big reputation that's been around for a long time. And this collaboration is mutually beneficial. Snuck Farms can say that they know that there's cut flowers that are expanding. They can say, we're teaching courses. We actually have a flower farmer teaching them. And in return, she has this place with excellent amenities. So one thing to think about is who are the clientele who you think would be interested in a workshop, and then thinking about where they might go. And that could be a great collaboration in working with them on times that make sense. This turned into a really cool collaboration because they also produce, so they're a nursery and they also produce plugs, and she now has a say in what plugs they produce. And so we have the cool cut flowers that get sold, which has been great for the farmers, and the public likes it as well. I haven't talked about the Utah Cut Flower Farm Association today, but we established in 2019, and this was our first year. We decided to put on the first annual Utah Flower Day back in August. And so we were looking for a venue that would be big enough. Didn't know how many people were gonna come. As it happened, USU Extension and Salt Lake County put in a new building recently. That's kind of a central location. And so Extension's rule is that if we are involved, they don't have to pay the building fee. And so that's easy enough. I'm an Extension, I can be part of that. And so the UCFFA got free rental with excellent amenities, but Extension got awesome publicity about this. Cut flowers are kind of a new demographic to come into Extension. And so we were able, and I have to say, farms are way better at promoting on social media and all the modern things than we are. And so we were able to have more people come to this building than otherwise would have. So it really worked both ways. So don't be afraid to ask to collaborate with a business if that's a better place to host an event, or maybe. We also heavily involved florists. We offered free booths to sponsors, and we also offered booths to cut flower farms. And so they were able to bring as much as they wanted to sell too. So it was a really great public education event. We ended up having about 500 attendees. So that was really exciting, and it helped us get the word out. But it was because of this awesome collaboration, I think, that it was so successful. All right. So all that said, you still have to make sure you enjoy it. True story, I am very much an introvert. All of my hobbies, very introverted. I love homesteading, so I'm in my gardens all the time. I like to run with my dog. But it doesn't mean I can't, but I like to teach too. It gets me really excited to see everybody. It kind of reinvigorates things. But when I need energy, I go and do those things that are more introverted. So if you're introverted too, doesn't mean you can't teach, but it's something to kind of check in with. Does teaching take all of your energy? Maybe it's not worth it, and that's okay. There's plenty of other sales channels to go. So the goal in hosting a workshop, so sometimes when people are learning a new thing, they're coming to a farm, or they're coming to a place they haven't been, there can be some anxiety there. There can be some nervousness that they're not going to do it right. And so the job of the host is to be welcoming and engaging and open and give them this experience where they feel like they got their money's worth. So kind of cultivating this atmosphere. If that's not your thing, you want to grow those flowers and not necessarily interact a whole lot, that's okay. But just make sure to check in with yourself. Also, I found with teaching how much you really have to know the material, right? It's okay to read about it and maybe do it on your own a little bit, but to teach it, there can be so many questions that come from all angles. And so it's best not to do it in the first year, but maybe after the second year or so, that could be a nice time to move into that space. And then my last thing on here to think about is, does teaching come naturally? Again, is it something you enjoy? So I put these pictures as a reminder to myself. This is during my PhD. Here I am working with that dairy manure. And it reminds me of a soil chemistry class I took where the professor had the most beautiful soul and genuine heart, kindest man, but boy, and his brilliance was way up here. It was really hard to follow anything he said, though. I felt like if I could catch about 30 seconds at a time of what he was saying, I felt awesome. And I was raising my hand every couple of minutes to slow him down. Not every student's gonna do that, and so, but he was an excellent researcher. He still taught, but it didn't necessarily come naturally. And if you're someone like that who skips a lot of steps, doesn't mean you can't teach, but maybe sit down and practice on somebody who isn't familiar with flower farming to kind of get those kinks out. Don't want to intimidate folks. So I know I'm running kind of short on time, so I want to talk about finding customers and promoting. And this comes from my heart because I like to be a customer in these kind of situations. And I have some perspective on that. So again, workshops are all about supporting and spreading your brand. It brings up this whole idea of local flower farming. And we're going to talk in my florist talk about how important local cut flowers are. So it's a great way to spread education. It's a great way to spread awareness about your farm. This is where people want to come when they need cut flowers. So ways to attract customers and retain them. Email and newsletters are a great way to promote events. You can make sure that people get that information. One of the things that I do when I'm at events, I keep it simple. I just print off a bunch of paper copies for people to sign up. They've got their name and their farm name. This is because we were offering free plant and soil testing, so we needed to know their address to see if it fit on our tour, but their email was key. So farm, their name, and their email address. And that way, when I needed to let them know, hey, we're going out to do some serving, would you like your farm to be included? It was super easy. So I just do this simple method. If you're a flower farmer at the farmer's market, this is a great place to get those email lists. And so then when there's going to be an event, emails are a great way to reach those people and make sure they see it. There's these folks who do pottery near where I live. I love their pottery. It's great. My mom loves it, and so I was looking for Christmas gifts. They sent out an email about, hey, we're having this studio event, and I saw it. I know they did it a lot on social media, and we're going to talk about social media, but it's easier to miss that because of the algorithms. So having multiple forms of letting people know is really helpful. So email newsletters are one of those. Make sure you give notice, send emails in advance. Don't send it the night before or the day before. People just need more notice. I'd say not more than 3 months before. That's a bit much. And then email them again when registration opens. And then the people who registered, make sure you email them the week of to let them know the key information. It's really nice touch to follow up too with pictures, any kind of information that they might want to know, and potentially surveys. So this brings me to the next topic. This is the one that's near and dear to my heart. So social media is great. That's in the next slide. But I gotta say, for new people trying to find something to do, most of us are not going on Instagram or Facebook to peruse. We go to Google. And this is something that my boyfriend and I talk about all the time, because as I give talks around the state, we sometimes make them into little trips, and we want to find things to do. And it can be really hard when people are only on social media. We go to Google. So if you have a website that adds a bunch of professionalism, it makes you think, okay, that place is legit. I'm gonna go there. And it makes it searchable on the web. So have your location. I noticed this about a lot of Utah cut flower farms. They don't necessarily mention their location. I get not wanting your exact address on Google, but at least having your county or city or something like that to help know, okay, this isn't too far away from where I am. So this is a nice way. One thing I want to bring up though is I know keeping up websites or even starting a website can be a big task, and it's not for everybody. I personally hired someone to make my website. I know a lot of flower farmers who have done that. If you don't think you're going to want to keep it up very often, just keep it as simple as possible. Don't put a bunch of dates on there that are quickly going to look out of date. Direct them to your social media, but at least you have something that's searchable and in place. Oh, I put a picture of North Ogden Flower Farm. I just think her website is super easy to use. It's beautiful. It helps me think about what that on-farm experience is going to be like. I can picture it. Okay, I got to move. Social media is great. You can read a lot of this. We can't ask for a more aesthetic crop. I know this is where a lot of Utah flower farmers, especially Instagram, is where they're selling things and promoting events. Oop. Now, talking about pricing. This is what everyone wants to know. Pricing comes down to what type of workshop you're going to put on. And by the way, if we run out of time for questions, I'll be here at lunch and I'll be here after, so I'm happy to meet with you and talk some more. But the thing to think about is what kind of workshop would your area support? If it's a rural area and they're not going to spend a lot of money, a you pick, make your own bouquet where it's going to be in a paper sleeve, that's the way to go. Don't have them make a grand centerpiece because that's going to cost you a lot in vases and stems and everything in between. The biggest thing too is, oh, I thought I had a ruby picture. Oh, that's in the next one here. So what I recommend truly is look at other farm websites. Prices should be on the website. That's really helpful for people to see if they'd want to participate. Look at other farms. Doesn't matter if they're in another state. One of my tricks is that I will look at wherever I am, Logan, Utah, Salt Lake City, what is the population size of the county and what is the median income? Know what it is for where you live. You can look at any other farm website and just kind of check in where they live to see how that gauges with where you're at. Higher income place, okay, they can charge a little bit more. But that is the best way, is to take a look around and see where other people are charging. Here's Ruby again. This is the first thing she taught the flower farmers when I started working with them. It's better to lower your prices than raise them. People get used to a certain price point. This is in the handout, but it's talking about the budget to host a workshop. It can be really awkward to charge, right? But if you have a budget and you know what those input costs are, that's something to stand behind, right? You can argue with an opinion, but it's harder to argue with a number. So knowing what it costs to put on the workshop is the key thing. And sorry, we ran out of time to talk more about that. So I just want to summarize and say that we conducted this survey of cut flower farmers. It's all across the board. Farms typically doubled their income with every year of being a farm. This tremendous range, though, the most successful farmers had 2 or more sales channels. And agritourism type events really boosted the farm revenue. If that is a good fit for you, think about the amenities at the farm, think about where you are, your region, use multiple channels to promote it, to help people find you, and make sure you charge what you're worth. And so with that, I think we might have time for a question or so. Okay. All right. Little bit of information. So here is my website, smallfarmslab.com. I also have Instagram at USU Small Farms, where I promote different things as we come out with fact sheets and so forth. This QR code is for my evaluation. So if you don't fill out a paper copy, you can scan this QR and fill it out there. And with that, I'm officially done talking on this first topic. If there's any questions, let me know.